All right, let's dive into something pretty deep today. We're tackling a question that really gets to the heart of what marriage means, in a spiritual sense. Can a private promise, just between two people and God, be enough to make a sexual relationship legitimate? Let's get into it. So let's start with this core concept, right? The idea that sex isn't just physical. The frameworks we're looking at today suggest it's an act that literally opens a spiritual doorway between two people. And that doorway can lead to good things or not so good things. Let's break down what that actually means.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. We've got 5 sections. We'll start with the traditional religious roles, then explore this idea of a spiritual connection, and then we'll jump right into the debate, personal vows versus public ones.
All right, first up, before we can even get to the whole personal vow thing, we've got to understand the traditional view. Why is sex outside of a formal marriage considered such a serious issue in so many faith traditions? Okay, so there's this really important word you need to know from the New Testament. It's the Greek word porneia. Now, this isn't just one specific act. It's a super broad catch-all term for pretty much any kind of sexual activity that happens outside of a one-man, one-woman marriage. And, the sources are pretty clear that the Bible doesn't pull any punches when it comes to porneia. I mean, just look at this list. It's not treated like some minor mistake. It's right up there with murder and idolatry, and there are these repeated warnings that practicing it without repentance has serious, eternal consequences.
And we're not just talking about the obvious earthly stuff, like STDs or unplanned pregnancies, although those are definitely part of it. The real danger that's being pointed to here is spiritual.
And wow, this quote from theologian Sam Storms, it really puts it in perspective, doesn't it? From this viewpoint, the stakes could not be higher. He's saying that if you continue down this path without turning back, you are risking your actual soul. Okay, so now that we've got the sin part down, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about what's supposedly happening on a spiritual level. This is where we get into that whole spiritual doorway idea. This is where the idea of soul ties comes in. Think of it like this. One source describes them as these invisible, spiritual, umbilical cords that link two people together. They can affect your thoughts, your emotions, everything, long after you've physically separated. Kind of intense, right?
And this comment really nails that idea. It's not just a physical act. It's seen as something that literally binds two souls together. You're opening yourself up on a whole other level, creating a connection that you can't just, wipe away.
So how do these soul ties form, especially the ones considered ungodly or unhealthy? Well, our sources lay out a few ways. But look at number 1. Sexual intimacy outside of marriage is right at the top of the list as the primary way these potentially damaging spiritual bonds get created. Okay, so let's just run with this idea for a second. If sex really does open this powerful spiritual doorway, is there any way to, protect it, to make it legitimate without the whole big public wedding? This is where it gets super interesting. And that brings us right to the heart of our discussion today, the personal vows theory. It's a really modern take on this ancient act, trying to find a path that feels authentic in today's world. So what is it exactly? Well, the theory goes like this. A couple can make a sincere, private promise to God and to each other, a vow of lifelong commitment, and that this vow, in and of itself, could actually make their union legitimate in a spiritual sense. No state paperwork, no big church ceremony needed. Now, what's the logic behind this? The people who support this idea point to a few things. First, it's all about the heart, right? God sees your true intentions. They also argue it's kind of like how marriage was in the very beginning, before all the legal stuff. It's the intent and the action that really matter, not some piece of paper. So here's the absolute key. The vow is meant to be an intentional seal. It's like you're consciously telling God, hey, this spiritual doorway we're opening, it's legitimate, it's protected. You're trying to cleanse it of any guilt or shame and make the connection sacred. But of course, it's not that simple. As you can imagine, this idea gets a lot of pushback from more traditional views that really emphasize the public side of marriage. See, in the traditional view, marriage has 2 crucial parts. You've got the public promise, the verba solemnia, which is basically you saying your vows out loud in front of everyone, your community. Then that public promise is sealed by the private act. That public part is a huge deal for accountability. And this chart does a great job of breaking down the differences. Look at accountability. With a personal vow, you're really only accountable to yourselves and God. But with a public covenant, your whole community, the law, everyone is involved. That changes everything about the weight and permanence of the commitment. And this comment from Reddit is,
Well, it's blunt, but it gets right to the core of the skepticism. It asks a tough question. Is a private vow a genuine act of commitment, or is it just a spiritual loophole to make yourself feel better about having what is otherwise considered premarital sex? All right, for our last section, let's try to bring these two big ideas together. If someone were to make a private vow, what would it need to have to be considered truly legitimate in a spiritual sense? Well, the sources point out some pretty big risks you'd have to deal with. First, if it's a secret, how can anyone hold you accountable? Second, is it really a lifelong covenant if there's an easy exit strategy built right in? And finally, think about this. Breaking a personal vow made directly to God, that could be seen as an even bigger deal than a regular breakup.
And this really brings it all home. At the end of the day, whether it's a public ceremony or a private vow, true legitimacy seems to boil down to one thing: a total, complete surrender of your single identity. It's about fundamentally becoming a we. Without that, any vow is just a shadow of the real thing. So that's what we're left with. It's a fascinating question, isn't it? Where does a promise, a covenant, get its real power? Is it from the sincerity deep in your heart, something only you and God know? Or is it from the strength of a promise made out loud for all the world to hear and hold you to? What really seals that spiritual doorway?